Again, you are taking a poll and it is asking you which of these models are you most familiar with? If you could kind of do that quickly, that'd be great. We're at 72%. Okay, so we're at 74. Let's try for 75 for the sake of time. I hate to move on. Ooh, so close. Hopefully, can y'all hear an echo? Do you hear an echo, Jenny? No? Okay, great. Let's see. All right, so we had 76. I'm going to end that poll. We have a few more poll questions. So I'm going to just share the results that it looks like most of you are most familiar with either the sexual health model, which we won't be talking about today, but we can offer others resources for that, and then the circles of sexuality. So I'm going to stop sharing there, and I'm going to launch the next poll. And this is what you use in your work. So this may be very similar. So which of the models do you most use in your work? So I'm going to give you a few more minutes. So if you, hopefully audio is good, I'll put it in the chat. Please take the poll asking which model you use the most in your work. All right, we're almost to 75 again. There we go. Thank you all. And so I'm going to end that poll as well and share the results. So again, it looks like most folks use other models as well as the circles of sexuality. And some people say none, and others offer up that the sexual health model, of course, is one that they use. And then your last poll is more for us to kind of figure out how you identify yourselves or selves. So if you could denote on the poll the role, like, do you define yourself primarily as a um, social worker, educator, or administrator? So I'll be using the chat periodically to ensure since sound may be choppy, to also make sure that you can hear what I'm saying. And I may switch over to the phone in a few, but right now I'm going to stay on the computer and hopefully you'll be able to hear me. We're at 72%, which is great. Let's try to get a few more folks. Awesome. So at 75, we're looking at most folks define themselves as either an educator and or a social work and educator. We have a few administrators. We have some folks who are doing outreach and education, which is amazing, and some, or at least one person who is identified as a counselor. So we appreciate you taking our poll on today. And so we're going to dive right in and get started. We want to remind you that the Q&A box is for any questions that may come up in your mind. The chat box for any commentary. I'll be monitoring it as well as Jenny. And we'll also be utilizing the chat to try to engage you as much as we can through this virtual space. So thank you for taking the polls. And I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint and we'll continue. Okay.
Okay. Tanya, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, I'm
You
sorry. I was
good?
on mute.
Okay, good.
I can hear you.
I know. All these buttons. I know I just unmuted myself. Hi, everyone. Um, so just wanted to start by saying I feel like anytime we're doing sort of sexual health work with anyone, it's also necessary to reflect on our own sexuality and sexual behaviors and process. Um, and it helps us remember kind of what it's like to talk to people about sex. It can be very vulnerable, and there's a lot of emotions that can come up around it. So during this training, we're kind of going to use a dual lens to talk about clients that you might see, but also kind of reflect for yourself and kind of do a parallel process. Okay. Okay, next slide, Tanya.
Is it the next one?
Yeah. No, it's not. It hasn't come up yet, but so the next
Oh,
one,
okay.
it's not moving. Yeah. But while Tanya's switching the slide, also, if you have a piece of paper you want to write some things down on, or your phone, or you just want to reflect without writing today, there's going to be a sort of a few questions for you also to answer during the models about yourself or about clients. And just wanted to talk about the kindness and respect that we use no matter what model, right? Because of it's such a sensitive topic to talk about sex with folks. So just to remember that kindness and respect and putting yourself in the position of how you would want someone to talk to you about sex. Okay, next slide. So now I'm going to invite you to do a little relaxation grounding exercise just to sort of get into the space, into the training. You can do this with me if you want. You can just sort of sit silently, whatever you need to kind of transition from what your morning was to now for the next, right, almost 75 minutes. And so I'm going to lead you through a grounding exercise. And it's going to be a little bit of a body scan, a little bit of a relaxation, and it's going to include genital awareness. Since we are kind of talking about sex, I thought it was good to kind of add that into our bodies, right? We are all sexual beings, most of us in some sort of way. And so that we are also talking to people about them being sexual beings. So just sort of notice that about yourself. So you can do this with me, you can sit, whatever you need, but I'm gonna lead you through kind of a grounding exercise for a few minutes. So just get comfy wherever you're at. You can close your eyes, you can leave them open, you can kind of gaze out the window. I like to look at the trees lately. And just sort of notice. You don't have to do anything to it. Just notice that you're breathing. And then I always think it's nice to take a couple of what's called letting out breaths. So breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth, like a sigh. And it's just sort of on the exhale, just kind of letting go of any tension you don't need. Anything you could just put away for a little bit, just for this training. So breathing in through your nose and then kind of out through your mouth, letting your shoulders drop. This usually helps us sort of sink in and relax a little bit. And I want you to just notice your body, right? You have this body, you're on a chair, you're on a couch, you're, I don't know, on a floor, the bed, wherever you're at right now. Just kind of notice your body being there exactly where it's at and how it feels, maybe the heaviness of your body, or if anything stands out about your body. And almost go through just from your head to your feet, just kind of noticing all these parts of your body, just briefly sort of checking in with your whole entire body. And then we're going to do a little bit of kind of a squeeze and response, a little bit of what it's called progressive muscle relaxation. It's a little piece of that. But if you take your fist and you just tighten them up, and I want you to notice how that feels, right? Like you can notice kind of pressure or blood or no blood flow, like any of that. Just notice it and kind of hold them tight for a couple seconds and then let go. And just kind of notice how that feels, right? When the blood comes back into your hands or even looking at them with the color. And then squeeze again. And don't hold your breath though, just continue to breathe. Just squeeze for a few seconds and breathe. And then relax and kind of notice what those two situations feel like in your hand, right? Tense and relax. And now we're going to do the same thing if you notice your genitals, right? So if you notice kind of, it might be where you're sitting or where you're lying, but you're going to notice the whole area kind of on your pelvic floor, right? The bottom is like your genitals, the perineum, which is between your anus and your scrotum, or your anus and your vulva. And then notice your anus. And that whole area, which you might be sitting on or lying on, is just sort of notice it for a second. And we're going to do the same thing. Some of you might know Kegel exercises. Some of you might not, but it's a tightening of the pelvic floor muscles just for a moment. It's kind of like what we did with our fist. It just brings attention to this area, right? And in a lot of body scans, this area is not included. So we are including it because we're talking about sex today. So it's almost like if you can pull up on your muscles, it's almost like when you stop the stream of urine, right? When you're going to the bathroom and you need to stop, it's those muscles involved. So even just trying to kind of pull those up for a moment and see if you can feel something. If you don't, that's okay too. Just bringing attention and breathing. Don't forget to breathe. And then letting go and kind of noticing if there's any difference there, what you notice. And kind of pulling up again, right, on those muscles and kind of squeezing a little bit, just like your fist, but pulling up as if you were stopping the stream of urine. Breathing, holding it for a second. And then letting go. And just take another moment. We're going to come back into the room. But before we do, we're going to do a couple more of those letting out breaths, right? So if anything just came up for you, you're just going to breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. Just sigh it out, right? Let it out. Drop any tension. And just do one more of those. And then open your eyes if they're closed, or just kind of come back into the room. I like to stretch. Just kind of use your body to get back. If you need to stand up, whatever you need to do. And then we're going to get started. Thank you all for joining me. Okay. Next slide, Tanya, please. Okay, so we do this a lot, right? We talk to clients about sex, what sex they're having, about their sexuality, about what they're doing sexually. And we're just going to draw attention to how we do that, right? I like these pictures because it's sort of, this is one way that people talk about sex. They use different words for it. They might use nicknames, right, for genitals, or so we all have these different ways to talk about it. And I'm going to talk about just one sort of framework you can use. Okay, next slide, Tanya. So this is what we can call co-constructed language. And it's wanting to build something with your client, like the language that you two can use so that you can understand each other. Because particularly in sexuality, people use a lot of terms that you might not know what they're talking about. And sometimes we act like we do, and then we are on a totally different page. So we're kind of constructing this as we go, but this is one framework to see it, is this idea of cool language, right? This is sort of what would be medical language, kind of, right? It's a little bit, depending on the situation you're in, right? Medical, cool, cold sometimes. But this would be an example of that, as we're going to start with the idea of intercourse, right? You're using that word, you're talking to someone about intercourse. And then if we moved into warm language, these are more kind of what I think is sort of therapeutic terms. This is mostly where you're going to land. This is where you find out a lot of client information and how they talk about things to you. So this is client focused, right? So we're listening to them. So intercourse might become sex, and more of a warm language term. And then we have this hot language, right? This is really visceral. This is very body. Sometimes it can be very charged. And it's used kind of sparingly. Sometimes it's used to actually shock people into something, like if you're working with partners and it's like this sort of boom, let's just drop that and see what happens. Sometimes clients use it for different reasons. But this is usually a sparing type of language if we're using it as providers. And this would be more like fucking, right? So we go from intercourse to sex to fucking. But what I'm also going to say is every client is different, and we are all different as to what language we use on a daily basis, how we talk. For us, hot language might be more warm to someone else, right? And so we have to know kind of what that is for ourselves and how to meet clients where they're at. Okay. So we're just going to do a couple of these, right? And you can use the chat box if you want. This is usually a fun, I really love this in person. It gets the energy going. I'm going to start with cool language, and then we're going to type in, so what warm language might be for this word, okay? Just whatever you want to say. So let's start with, we're going to do anus. That's a cool language term. So type in the chat box what you think a warm language term might be for that. Okay.
You
So we
can
have,
see the chat, Jenny.
yeah, I can read that, Tanya.
Okay,
so
great.
butthole, butt. What else we got? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Bum. Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. Booty. Mm-hmm. So what if we had to add buttocks? It's always a favorite. Pound. Mm-hmm. How do you know the difference between warm language in this and what would be hot language? Is there anything else that you would use as a hot language for anus? Type that in. Ass. Mm-hmm. Asshole. In the ass. Sometimes I really find some that I'm like, oh, I've never heard of that before. It's always an interesting, fun process. Okay, so what if we do one more, and we're gonna do, let's do penis. Yes. Oh, and somebody just said arse could be considered warm or hot, which is very true, right? And then sometimes people hear that and they're like, is that cool language, arse? So that's that other thing that's different for us. But let's also do penis. Okay, so these are the warm. We're gonna start with warm, so that's dick. Dick, cock. Lots of dicks. Peppy. Horse. Is there anything that would be different with hot, like mushroom tip? Like, see, I love these. What would be hot language? Anything different than what we already heard? Okay, so cock. So some people I think might think cock is hot, and sometimes it's not as much, right? It's warm. Shaft. Any other hot language for penis? Eggplant. Love it, love it. Junk. Mm-hmm. Right. And this is where you can start seeing, like, because you might be having sort of feelings or thoughts about what other people saying, magic stick, thinking, gosh, that seems really hot to me, or that seems warm, or that's even like cool. And so this is that difference of when we start listening to how clients talk to us, how we can also talk to them a little bit. Peter. All right, thanks y'all. We are gonna move on. So just to have this in your head in a language sort of style. Thanks for participating. All right, your turn, Tanya.
Thank you so much. I'm just checking in. I'm sorry, I was preoccupied trying to make sure. I'm hoping that the audio was great. So, Juanella, if you could reach me, if you want to text me or chat me, just to make sure. I think the sound is good now. We're going to keep going. So many of you, if you've ever been in one of my workshops or hear me talking about sex and sexuality, sex education, you probably have heard the circles of sexuality. And so what I wanted to offer up today is a more sex positive approach to how this can be useful in your work. Ultimately, the circles of sexuality were pretty much created